Lois is a doting mother, but she has had her fair share of awful experiences. Let's see what the worst things that ever happened to Lois Griffin are. Kicking off our countdown is one of the episodes where Lois simply can't catch a break. The episode opens with a very sad scene, and even though we know Lois isn't the most popular, we never expected her friend's situation to be this dire. Yikes, off to a bad start.
You're my best friend.
You're awesome, Lois.
Best friends.
Now we do something we rarely do. Follow Lois around during her day. In an attempt to cheer herself up, she goes to visit her favorite coffee shop. She was a regular and was on a first-name basis with the baristas, but something she hadn't noticed before caught her eye. Spoiler alert, this was not the start of something good. Lois obviously became obsessed with the Customer of the Week award, and when she didn't get picked, she had a total meltdown. Lois can be quite annoying sometimes, but no one likes seeing a mother sob in a public bathroom. She was not about to give up though, and the Customer of the Week became the only thing she could think of. Poor Stewie was stuck with her for the day, and all Lois could talk about was her newfound obsession. Little did anyone know it would grow into something that even Lois couldn't control anymore.
I know it's a silly little award, but I don't ask for much.
In an attempt to suck up to the baristas, Lois tried everything from tipping to complimenting the baristas to even buying one of their insanely overpriced art pieces. You'd think a serious hole in the pocket would pull Lois out of her unhinged state, but alas, no such luck occurred.
You are very talented.
It has to be cash.
Perfect.
In some kind of universal justice, another week went by without Lois winning the coveted award. After some bad advice that Lois took completely out of context, a bad idea begins brewing in her brain. Instead of continuing on the good path, Lois turned to dark schemes to raise her coffee shop standing.
Yes. Hero, I'll be a hero, and then they'll have to make me Customer of the Week.
Lois used the strategy of creating a disaster to step in and be the hero. But in typical Family Guy fashion, nothing ever goes to plan. Her plan of fooling around with one of the barista's allergies quickly escalated when she wasn't able to step in. Of course, things went from bad to worse when the poor girl crashed her car as well.
Oh, shaving cream.
Lois, keeping up the facade, visited the injured barista in the hospital and nearly gave herself away. Unfortunately, the trouble was not over yet, since Lois would soon have more holes to plug to ensure nothing led back to her.
Do they have any leads on who could have done it?
No.
Good. Grief. Good grief.
In a show of perfect timing, Lois arrived at the coffee shop at the exact moment that another employee reviewed the security footage and pinned her to the crime. Instead of keeping her cool, Lois jumped straight on the train to Crazy Town.
What the hell? Lois?
This isn't scary. I'm a good person.
As Lois was feeding the barista's cat to ensure no one noticed his absence, she ran into even more trouble. Now, Lois had to hide the fact that she had him hidden away and deal with his roommates as well. Talk about a chaotic mess.
If I don't drop it off, they're gonna know something's wrong.
At family dinner, Lois finally cracked. The pressure had become too much, and when Brian brought the contest up, she completely lost her cool. The award probably seemed pretty silly in comparison now, and Lois could only hide her mess for so long.
Did you ever win?
Why? Why would you bring that up? What, are you obsessed with it?
Before too long, the police were on her trail, and she dejectedly finished her housework as the cops closed in on the house. At this stage, Lois had accepted her fate and calmly awaited their arrival. After serving time in jail, everything came full circle when Lois entered another coffee shop. She was clearly still obsessed with other people's opinions of her, especially those of the new coffee shop baristas. Will she ever learn?
I must be a pretty good person to give a 5.
There's always something interesting happening in Quahog, and on this fateful day, a very special president comes into town for our number 9 spot. Peter, during one of his many strange fads, insists on jumping in and being the hero. But as usual, the consequences are not good. Poor Peter let his idiocy get the better of him, resulting in quite a bad series of events for Lois.
You don't need a jack. I am a jack. Come on, I'll lift that thing for you. Ah!
Peter!
Oh my God! Call an ambulance!
In an unexpected turn of events, Bill Clinton decides to visit Peter in the hospital, since if you count out Peter's stupidity, he was the reason he was there in the first place. To return the favor, the president decided to show Peter a good time, and of course, things quickly got out of hand.
Mr. President, what are you doing here? Well, I felt so bad that Peter hurt himself fixing my car. When you get out of here, I'm gonna take you out and show you the time of your life.
The president and Peter were like two immature peas in a pod, and they got up to quite a few crazy shenanigans in their newfound adventure. After a while, Lois had enough and decided to step in herself. Talk about being a controlling wife, eh?
Come on, hop in my limo.
Wow, a limo! Oh boy, this is gonna be fun. I haven't made a crank call in years.
In an extreme attempt to put a stop to the craziness, Lois put her foot down and tried to forbid Peter from seeing his new friend, but he was already having too much fun. You'd think the president had more important things to do than hang out with Peter, like, running the country.
I forbid you to hang out with him anymore.
No way! Bill Clinton makes me feel young.
Well, if he won't listen, I'm just gonna have to go talk to Bill Clinton myself.
Lois stuck to her word and tried to tackle the problem at the root, but this proved to not be as easy as she imagined. Instead of getting a firm word in with Bill Clinton, she fell victim to his charms and ended up helping him firm some other things up. Who would have thought Lois was a cheater after all?
Mr. President, I need to have a word with you. Wow, you certainly are very persuasive.
Unfortunately, as it always does, the truth came out, and Peter was shocked to find his wife in Clinton's bed. Of course, Lois feels guilty immediately, but even she can't deny the apparent charm that the president has. That kind of puts a downer on hanging out with his new friend for Peter.
I know nothing I could say to you could possibly justify why I slept with Bill.
Peter was quite upset at how the events played out, and who could blame him? We've always known Lois was somewhat of a ditz, but this is low, even for her. Instead of accepting her apology, Peter decides that it would be better to go stay at a good friend's place for a while.
Apparently, there's the side of Bill Clinton the world knows, and then there's the dark sex-crazed side only I know.
The guilt was eating Lois alive, and she was desperately scrambling to find a way to fix things. Although trust is not something that can easily be rebuilt, she knew that she needed to attempt to save their marriage, to save the family. Strangely enough, the solution she came up with was everything but conventional.
Well, the way I figure it, the only way to even things out between us is if you have sex with someone else too.
Lois was prepared to take one on the chin and let Peter choose the most beautiful woman he wanted to get it on with. But she was definitely not prepared for who he actually chose in the end. The choice of Babs was the last one Lois ever expected, and saying it's a real shocker would be an understatement.
Anybody I want?
Anybody. Don't be afraid to tell me.
Babs.
Mom, would you have sex with Peter?
Of course, dear.
Really?
We see a lot of happy and crazy stories going down in Quahog, but for once, Quahog itself was the problem at the number 8 spot. The family was feeling increasingly pressured in a town that was growing more delinquent by the day.
Well, I hate to admit it, Lois, but over the last couple of years, this town has changed a lot, and not necessarily for the better.
Lois raised all her children in Quahog and made her family roots there, but even she was realizing that the risks were growing by the day. Near everyone had criminal intentions, even the newborns. We certainly could not handle an entire town of evil babies like Stewie.
There we go, it's a boy!
And he's got a gun!
It's sad to think that Quahog isn't safe for families anymore.
As usual, Peter comes up with an idea and pulls the trigger without even speaking to the family, and Lois has to deal with the fallout. He managed to sell their house and buy a rundown farm outside of town, leaving Lois and the kids absolutely no say in the matter.
Peter, you went out and bought a farm without even talking to me about it?
Just think of this farm as our next great adventure.
Naturally, it didn't take long for things to start going less than well on the farm either. The family actually now had to work and grow things to make a profit, to stay alive. But farming is not something that any of them have done. This made a bad situation even more desperate.
Peter, I've been running the numbers on this farm and we're in deep trouble. We haven't grown a single crop to sell.
With a hectic tornado approaching, the Griffin family quickly learned why living out in nature wasn't the easiest thing. Fate was definitely pushing them though, since this exact storm was what led them to a wild discovery. Now they know how the previous owners of the farm made any money.
Come on, into the storm cellar!
You guys, I think this is a meth lab.
Against her better judgment, Lois agrees to let the family start cooking meth. But, of course, this was the worst decision they could have made. Instead of moving away from crime, they moved into it. And what followed was a Breaking Bad-like series of events.
Dealing drugs is morally wrong, not to mention incredibly dangerous.
Come on, we've always been risk takers.
All right, Peter, we can make one meth, and that's it.
When Brian came home from the agriculture school, he was shocked to find that the family had fallen deep into a meth habit. This was rather shocking and extremely dangerous, and as with many times before, Peter was responsible for their dire situation.
Hey, Brian's home!
What the hell is going on?
Nothing. Just working on a family project.
A hard realization hit Lois when they sobered up, and it was quite ironic if you think about it. Lois had enough of the criminal life, and she decided that she needs to go back to her real life.
All those drugs that are flooding into Quahog are from us.
Lois, where the hell you going?
I'm going back home to Quahog, where I belong.
The family resisted at first, but Lois's morals proved stronger this time around, and she had learned firsthand why being a drug dealer was not all that glamorous. Thankfully, a sign of divine intervention came down and ensured that the farm adventure stopped completely. Now, the Griffins could add meth cooking to their long list of strange skills.
But what about this farm? And this house?
Our number 7 spot kicks off with quite the shocker. Lois needing to take a pregnancy test. Could you imagine a Stewie 2.0? This may be too much for the world to handle. Obviously, Peter didn't take the news very well either.
Hey, Lois, I got your pregnancy test. What the hell you need this for?
I need it because I think I might be pregnant.
What? My God, are you sure it's yours?
By a miracle stroke of luck, the test came back negative, but this was a real eye-opener for Lois. She definitely already has her hands full, and Peter is probably the biggest baby she needs to take care of. However, her troubles were not over.
Although I gotta tell you, I was kind of getting used to the idea of having a little brother or sister.
Peter, we can't risk these things anymore.
In order to avoid another accident like this, Peter and Lois decide to argue over who should get a procedure done. In the end, Lois won and made Peter have a vasectomy. But little did she know what result this would bring about.
You're absolutely right. Lois, you're getting your tubes tied.
Why should I get my tubes tied? You should get a vasectomy.
To say that their love life hit a dry spell after Peter's surgery was an understatement, as it turns out. This was something Lois very much enjoyed before. The lack of intimacy quickly drove her out of her mind, and not knowing where to turn, she started snacking all the time.
Peter, we have to talk. We haven't had sex since your vasectomy.
I just don't feel like it, Lois, seeing as how I'm not a real man anymore.
Before long, Lois resembled a whale more than the hot soccer mom she used to be. Everyone noticed as well, and no one could believe she had let herself go so much. Peter, being as thick as usual, made her weight gain the center of attention wherever they went.
You know, Lois has gotten kind of fat since you guys stopped having sex.
Sorry, fat wife coming through. Sorry, excuse me, fat wife.
Lois was gaining weight rapidly, and she seemed to be dangling over the edge of a slippery slope. Who would have thought it was Peter making her hot after all? Now, she truly looked like someone who had 3 kids and diabetes.
Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go warn the chef that you've arrived.
He wants fat. I'll show him fat. The only reason I'm eating anyway is because I hit him. He won't touch me.
The insults were flying from everyone in the house, and now Lois knew what the family really thought of her. They say being a mother is a thankless job, but at this point, what poor Lois is experiencing is more like abuse.
God, you've put on weight. You're like one of those memory foam mattresses. Well, no need to clean up when I'm done. You'll probably just slice a couple of bananas in here and chow down, huh, Porky?
Things reached a boiling point when Peter and Lois started arguing more and more. It seems like sex was the only thing really bonding them together. They didn't hold back on the insults either. But thankfully, She had all that extra fat to absorb the blows.
Oh, hey, Hogzilla. You happen to see my hot wife, Lois, around? Last night, for God's sake, you farted. I felt like somebody was sticking me with a cigarette lighter from the car. You're fat.
Before too long, Peter lowered his standards and decided to get frisky with his overweight wife. At least now, both of them were overweight. The roles of fats understandably got intertwined, but it seems that this was something they both liked.
Lois, last night was amazing.
It was, wasn't it?
Fat sex is the hottest sex we've ever had.
Unfortunately, Peter discovered that he liked relations with his fat wife a lot more than he had thought he would. This led to something very unfortunate for Lois, and you could call it force feeding. He was now on a mission to see how big Lois could get.
Now come here, my fat concubine.
Hey, I'm not even hungry.
I want you bigger. I want you fatter. It will please me.
In typical Family Guy fashion, it didn't take long for things to start going downhill. Lois was quickly gaining so much weight that her health was deteriorating, and during one of their heated moments, Lois's body could not handle all the strain. Can you guess how Peter reacted?
Oh, Peter, I love you so much.
Oh, Lois, I have no idea if we're doing it or if that's just the back of your knee, but...
My chest hurts too. Oh my God. Peter, I think I'm having a heart attack.
Peter couldn't even rush to the doctor without being selfish. Maybe he really does see Lois as just a sack of meat. Thankfully, they made it in time and the doctor was able to cut out all of her fat. This left Lois just about the same as she was before, only with the knowledge that her husband likes her better fat.
Oh my God, you serious? Oh, we should get you to the hospital. All right, hold on a sec. All right, almost done. Almost done. Okay, let's go.
Lois seemed to have learned her lesson, but clearly, she couldn't get away without one more blow. Clearly, her parenting skills were not up to par yet, since Meg has coping mechanisms that were way worse than her mother's eating.
Well, it was a tough job removing all that fat to get to your heart, Mrs. Griffin, but you came through it beautifully.
I realize now that eating is not the way to solve my problems. You hear that, Meg?
For your information, Mom, I don't eat to solve my problems. I cut myself. Is that better?
They say time flies when you have kids, but this was more true than Lois ever realized, bringing us to number 6. Before she knew it, Stewie was ready to start preschool, and for the first time in forever, Lois had the day to herself. Surely, nothing could go wrong, right?
Well, it's just you and me, Stewie.
Do you have his lunch ready?
Lunch?
This big boy has his first whole day of preschool today.
Lois had a pretty normal day until she came home and found Brian seriously injured. He had badly broken his leg, and since Lois was in charge, she needed to decide what to do. As she patiently waited for advice, poor Brian was hanging on by a thread. But it turns out that he would be more okay than Lois.
God. Oh, Brian, are you okay? Okay, Bonnie might know if doggy arms are supposed to bend that way.
Ah!
Now, hang on, she's responding.
Take me
Typing.
to a hospital.
Lois made the trip to the hospital and managed to get Brian the help he needed. He was very hopped up on pain meds, which was good for him, but very bad for Lois. Who would have pegged Lois for a closet addict? Not me.
Oh, poor Brian. Have your pain meds kicked in yet?
Oh, yeah.
How does it feel?
Oh, yeah.
Before long, the boredom kicked in again for Lois, and she couldn't resist the temptation of testing one of Brian's pain pills. There's a very good reason to not mess with other people's prescription medications. But it would take too long for Lois to learn this. At first, she was having a blast.
I want a oh yeah. What? Where am I?
You're on my head, Lois.
Chris Daughtry? Hey, Peter's underwear. You've been through a lot, huh? I'm gonna fold you nice.
Lois was already starting a habit, but things became much less pleasant for her when she realized she and Brian had blasted through the pills already. She was now craving a fix with nowhere to find it. Do you think she'd just leave it be?
Oh, Brian, was that the last pill?
Yes, but that's fine, because my arm's all better.
As she guessed, Lois was fixated on finding more pills, but she tried to convince herself that it was at least for Brian. When Brian claimed to be all better, he lost his chance to voluntarily participate in this disaster and was promptly dragged on a crazy goose chase for pills by Lois.
Lois, I'm good. I don't want to get hooked on those things.
Who wants to go for a ride in the car?
Lois went for the obvious choice first, But let's just say that her ability to subtly ask for drugs was non-existent. She was extremely desperate, and it showed. It's crazy how quickly Lois fell off the bandwagon and went completely nuts for another fix. I always knew she'd crack some time with the family she has.
Okay, if anyone has drugs, it's high school kids under the bleachers. Hey, Daddy-O's, anyone want to blast off to Mars?
No, what?
Lois was properly tweaking by now, and unfortunately, Stewie was back in her care. She was only focused on getting high again, so much so that she couldn't even complete her normal mom functions. Poor Stewie had to brave it the best he could.
Damn it, there's gotta be one more pill in here somewhere. Okay, here, Stewie. Time to get nice and clean in your...
There's no water in here.
We know that Lois truly lost it when she roped Stewie into her mission to get her hands on a pill. What she subjected him to, you could easily call it the swimming lesson from hell.
Oh my god, that's the last pill. Oh, damn it, my hand's too big, it won't fit. Oh, Stewie.
Brian was the only sane one in the situation, and he kind of was the reason for everything in the first place. So it's only to be expected that he tried to help. Calming down a desperate druggie is no easy task, but thankfully, Brian used his big dog brain to trick Lois.
I have one pill left. It's in my crate, and you may have it.
Brian, I don't see it. What are you...
You're an addict, and I'm the reason those pills were in the house to begin with.
Lois had no choice but to spend the night in a cage, and to say that she had a bad trip would be a complete understatement. She went through the night in a fitful fever, having incredibly scary and sad hallucinations. Even though she was an addict, this was rough for anyone to deal with.
You're falling and you're falling and your teeth are coming out too.
God, so needy! She'll probably end up with the first fat slob she meets.
In the morning, Lois awoke to find that she had made it through the night. She also discovered that she wasn't alone, and even though she didn't know it, Brian had stayed by her side. She slowly recovered and then turned to high-inducing music instead. How weird is Lois?
Brian, you stayed by my side all night long?
I did.
Good dog, Brian. Very good dog. Alexa, play music that sounds like I'm on drugs.
Lois is the average suburban soccer mom, and this means that she lives a pretty average and normal life. During a grocery trip with her family in our number 5 spot, she warns the kids to be safe, and instead of following her own advice, she gets carried away and steals a ham. Unfortunately, this lit a spark in her, and she quickly spiraled into more and more thefts.
Okay, now don't wander too far, kids. You know, more children get kidnapped at the grocery store than anywhere else. Oh, this is cute. Oh my god, that was such a rush. I'm alive!
By the time Joe and Bonnie came over for dinner, Lois had already had an extensive shoplifting run, so much so that the guests took immediate notice of all their new things. Things were already incredibly suspicious, and Lois had a hard time keeping her new habit under control.
Thanks for having us over.
Yeah, it's a wonderful dinner. And on this beautiful new china. You guys have a lot of new stuff.
Yeah, Lois has been splurging her ass off.
Yeah, she has.
Days later, Lois had exhausted all her normal shopping stores, but her desire to get away with more stealing escapades was too great to resist. She stumbled into the most unlikely of places, only to be startled at seeing an unexpected, familiar face. Now, she couldn't hide the truth anymore.
Lois, you're in an auto parts store stealing mufflers. This is worse than that Winona Ryder thing.
Are you saying I'm a klepto?
Brian tried to reason with her, and eventually, he made her realize that she was going off the handle completely. The thrill had been too exciting for Lois, and it likely pointed to some more serious issues in her life. However, her stealing had even made it onto the local news.
Well, I think you've had enough thrills. Why don't you just put everything back, huh?
In other news, police are still looking for the culprit who stole a valuable Matisse painting from the Quahog Museum of Art.
After some convincing from Brian, Lois loaded everything she had ever taken into the car and was on the verge of returning it. Is anything ever that easy, though? Lois received some solid advice, but the chances of her taking it was dwindling by the minute.
All right, now, is that everything you stole?
That's everything.
You know, you really should talk to a therapist about this.
Just as Lois was about to leave and face up to what she did, Brian counted their chickens before they hatched. Her stealing had gotten so out of hand that the police were on her trail, and who else to arrest her other than good old neighbor Joe? Brian still tried to placate the situation, but Lois impulsively did something that made the situation so much worse.
You know, Lois, we're just lucky we got this under control before the police caught onto you.
You're under arrest.
Oh, crap.
Oh my god, I am so embarrassed. Let me just get my purse.
Lois couldn't make a getaway though, and Joe eventually caught up to her. She received quite a beating, and now her thrill chasing caused her to have a serious run-in with the law. Maybe getting beat up by the police would be enough excitement to cure her.
Sorry, Lois. Regulations. I can't give you any special treatment.
It's okay, Joe. I understand.
Shut up, maggot!
Lois pleaded with the judge and seemed to give a sincere apology. However, when he decided to be lenient, he saw firsthand exactly why Lois needed to be punished. She just could not help herself, and even reached her fingers over to the judge's things.
Well, Mrs. Griffin, considering this is your first offense, I've decided to go lenient and... Where the hell is my gavel? Give me that!
Lois had landed herself in prison for a good amount of time, long enough to miss a lot of her children's lives. Instead, she would now be spending her time with her new questionable cellmates. Would this teach her a lesson? Chances are that the answer is a resounding no.
3 years in prison? Oh my god, what have I done? I'm Lois.
I'm Fisty. That's Stabby and that's Balls. Pull up a chair, we're playing cards.
The first time the family came to visit her, they couldn't even be very sympathetic. Instead, Peter just started complaining about how he was now responsible for the housework. How selfish could he be? Maybe they were the ones who drove her to insanity after all.
Oh, it is so good to see all of you. How is everything at home?
Oh, it's horrible, Lois. I've had to do all the things that you usually do.
Everyone was still adjusting to the sentence, but Lois seemed to have come to terms with her punishment. She was realizing that there was a deeper root to her issues, but her self-awareness wouldn't last long. Unfortunately, she and the family decided to make a run for it.
Oh, I can't believe you're serving a 3-year sentence. It seems so harsh.
Well, the only upside is that it's given me time to think about why I ended up in here. I guess I was stealing because I was so sick of the same old routine. I felt like I had a void in my life.
The Griffins successfully escaped the police guards, but once outside, Lois realized that she had just turned her entire family into criminals. It seems her selfish acts were just getting worse and worse. They decided to hide out in a faraway place, Asian Town. How well would this go?
My god, you know what this means? You're all accessories to my escape. Well, if we're gonna hide out here in Asian Town, we have to find a place to live.
Yes, and we should do nothing to draw attention to ourselves as outsiders.
Before too long, Joe tracked them down. Being the rather good cop he is, Lois immediately fled once again, but once reality set in, she stopped in her tracks. We're not sure what ended up getting through to Lois, but she made the noble choice and decided to end things before they went any further.
Hey, Mom! Mr. Swanson's here to visit us.
What?
Oh my god, we gotta get out of here!
Look, honey, it was very sweet of you to break me out of jail, but I did something wrong, and I'm the one who should pay, not my whole family.
Disaster struck when Joe apprehended Lois, and in a turn of events, she was the only one who could save his life. Ignoring the horrible fact that Lois clearly didn't love Meg a lot, we're glad she did the right thing. In the end, saving Joe also got her out of jail, and life could return to normal. Of course, only if Lois could keep the klepto tendencies under wraps.
You're mine now, Lois!
Oh my god, Joe! Joe, you're too heavy! I can't hang on!
Pretend I'm your child, Lois! Nutmeg! Nutmeg! Lois, you saved my life.
It was so nice of Joe to work things out with that judge.
In the 4th countdown entry, we have a very important day for Lois, her birthday. It was much like any other day for Lois in terms of Peter treating her like garbage. Instead of celebrating her, Peter found ways to make jabs and make her feel like a dried-up prune. How miserable must her life be with a husband like Peter?
Happy birthday, Lois. You know, today, you officially become the oldest woman I've ever slept with.
Yes, you said the same thing last year.
Well, unlike you, that joke never gets old. Oh, and I forgot to pick up the cake.
The fact that Lois's parents didn't show up to her birthday was nothing new either. She already knew he'd make an excuse, but when Carter showed up late, he somehow made things even worse than just missing the party. Lois just can't catch a break.
Yeah, but I'm sure Daddy had a last-minute work thing. He's always put business first.
I thought I'd apologize with an upper-class New England mumble kiss. And here, I brought you a gift.
A gun?
Carter's present to Lois was the most inappropriate thing he could have thought of. As if this wasn't bad enough, he proved that he had no idea what his daughter was actually like. Talk about adding insult to injury.
Yeah, you love guns.
No, I don't. You don't know me at all. I can't believe you'd blow off my party, then give me a handgun. Especially when there's kids in the house.
Lois's birthday had come and gone, and she thought that life would return to normal, but she couldn't have been more wrong. When Peter got wind of the gun she had received, his obsessive little brain kicked in.
Okay, I'm off to the grocery store.
So what'd you do with the gun?
Gun?
Yeah, my father gave me a gun as a present yesterday.
Somehow, Peter found even more ways to make fun of Lois, proving once again just how tone-deaf he really is. She attempted to hide the gun away, but Peter was relentless. Her safe spot was not so safe after all, and when Peter discovered the gun, a complete nightmare started to unfold. Peter with a gun is just about the scariest thing we can imagine.
Where was that during birthday sex? Maybe I would have finished.
Unlike you, guns can actually fire. Anyway, I hid the gun someplace safe until I can figure out how to properly dispose of it.
Lois had enough of Peter's gun-fueled craziness, and since absolutely no one was safe in the house, she decided to take the unwanted gift back to her father. She couldn't imagine that this act would have even more terrible consequences.
Oh my God, Peter! Give me that! This gun is not staying in this house for one more second.
What?
Daddy, you need to take this gun back. I never should have accepted it in the first place, and you never should have given it to me.
Lois and Carter quickly started arguing about the gun, but Lois was firm in her decision of not wanting a firearm. Unfortunately, Carter was equally stubborn, and as is usual when guns are involved in fights, things quickly went very wrong. The injured one was unfortunately none other than Carter. Talk about irony.
No, you have to take it back.
I'm not. You're keeping it. It's a gift.
Damn it, Daddy, why won't you just take the gun?
Lois had to deal with the incredibly tough reality that she accidentally shot her father, and things were not looking good for him. Lois tried her best to get help, but the head trauma he suffered was quite severe. It wasn't made better by Dr. Hartman's not-so-funny comments.
Oh my God! Daddy! I'm so sorry! Oh, it can't be too serious. They haven't done an overhead crane shot yet. And please, how's my father?
Well, at this point, it's hard to say. He suffered severe head trauma. So if you want to beat him in Mario Kart, this is your chance.
By some miracle, Carter didn't die from the gunshot wound to the head, but he was now basically a vegetable who needed round-the-clock care. Who else volunteered other than Lois, the loving daughter? In the process, she roped the rest of the family in, most against their will.
All right, Daddy living here is going to be a big adjustment, and we're all going to have to make sacrifices. So, Meg, Daddy will sleep in your room, and Stewie and Chris, you'll stay where you are.
What? I'm the only one sacrificing.
Don't be ridiculous, Meg. I said everybody's names.
After a lot of TLC and dedicated assistance, Carter came back to consciousness, only there was one hitch. He had lost his memories. Call him a blank slate if you will, and Lois decided to do her part to try to make her father remember his life.
Daddy! You're back!
Please, anything but this show.
We could watch Netflix. Since you're doing a little better, Daddy, I thought you should see where you work. It might help trigger more memories about your life.
Carter was rather shocked at seeing the size of his empire, and since he had no memory of how it came to be, it was up to Lois to break the news. There was an endless list of bad things he had done. He may have been the worst person to ever live. Granted, this came as quite a shock to him. What goes around comes around, right?
I work here? Wow, this place is huge. What do we do? Are we nice?
You put pesticides in baby food.
Oh.
Not only that, your chemical waste gave a town cancer.
Yikes.
You burned down the entire Amazon rainforest.
Whoops.
After Carter learned of his professional life, he was interested in family life for the first time ever. This was the chance for Lois to finally unload on how her father was never around and never showed an interest in her. Having heard this, Carter had a change of heart and decided to try to make it up to Lois. It may have been a little late, but Lois could not be happier.
I don't like who I was. But from now on, I'm going to be a better father and grandfather. We're going to spend real time together.
Carter seemed to really want to follow through with his new convictions and change the horrible person he was in the past. The biggest part of this involved letting go of the fortune he made, and while Lois was happy to make the trade for a loving father, Peter was not so on board.
You know, you guys made me realize that I wasted my whole life caring about money, and I'm not giving up another second. That's why I've decided to retire from Pewterschmidt Industries.
Peter, stop being so selfish. For the first time in my life, I have a father who's kind and wants to spend time with me, and that's more important than any inheritance.
Yeah, well, I still want that money.
Eventually, Peter came around and realized how important this was to Lois. Everyone was happy, and for a few moments, Lois had the family she had always dreamed of. Of course, perfect moments like this never last, and the only missing link was Babs, who, like Peter, was not happy about losing her wealth.
Oh my God, Daddy!
Who told Carter he could give away our money?
Oh, the entire scene replayed again, with Carter getting another gunshot to the head and being rushed to the hospital. This time when he woke up, the entire family was there again, but he was back to being the same old Carter. Lois had now lost her loving father for good, but at least she had a glimpse of what a good childhood could have been like. How much wine do you think she's going to drink over this?
What are you idiots doing here? I can't waste time with you. I'm a cutthroat businessman.
Ah, the gunshot changed him back.
After a run-of-the-mill disaster at the Griffin family home, our third spot takes us to the episode where Lois and the family had to go stay with her father for a while. This coincidentally worked out well for Carter, but for Lois, this was the event that led to her learning something absolutely horrible.
Oh, thanks for letting us stay here, Daddy. We'll be out of your hair as soon as the house dries out.
Besides, I have to leave town for a couple days, and I need someone I can trust to look after the place.
Carter shared that he wouldn't be home while the family was visiting, but he was super reluctant to tell Lois any of the details of where he was going. This already raised a lot of red flags, but Lois was persistent, and her whiny voice would soon wear Carter down.
Where are you going?
Just some funeral. I'll be back in a couple of days. A funeral? Who died? Just an old family friend.
It's no secret that Lois didn't have the most involved parents, and in light of this, she was raised by her nanny. Imagine her shock when she realized that the funeral was for that exact nanny. Since Meredith, her nanny, was such a big part of her life, Lois decided that she could not miss the funeral under any circumstances. But little did she know, this would only bring even more heartache.
All right, look, I didn't want to say anything, but it was Meredith, your old nanny.
Meredith? Oh, I loved that woman. Well, I can't miss Meredith's funeral.
When Carter eventually agreed, he and Lois set off, and she thought this may be a good time to talk to Carter about all the ways she felt lonely as a young girl. Like any child, she just wanted the attention and love from her father, but sadly, she was dismissed since Carter never had time for her. Now, as an adult, this void was still tangible.
But I need you to watch the house.
Oh, Peter and the kids are more than capable of watching the house. And we never had a lot of daddy-daughter time when I was young. You were always so busy.
Not now, kitten.
I miss her so much. Yeah, I could always talk to her when I was having a hard time.
Arriving at the funeral, Lois quickly met Meredith's family, and instead of happy reminiscing, she learned that what really happened to Meredith was not at all what she thought. Meredith actually had a whole hidden life, and Lois already had the inkling that Carter was involved.
Meredith loved her time as a nanny. It's a shame she had to give it up after the affair.
Affair?
I know. We try not to talk about it.
It didn't take long to get to the truth out of the people at the funeral, and here she learned that her entire life had been a lie. The very person who took Meredith out of her life was her own parents, and her shock could not have been any bigger.
Some rich guy in Rhode Island. They were seeing each other, but then his wife found out and forced him to fire her.
So that's what happened.
Carter attempted to make apologies, but what he did was life-changing for Lois. She had to cope with her distant parents her whole life, and this bit of new knowledge sent her completely over the edge. Her anger towards Carter was definitely understandable, but we bet he was wishing he lied about where he was going right about now.
Yeah, I don't want to hear it. Do you have any idea what that woman meant to me? While you were off working or golfing or God knows what, she was at my piano recitals or teaching me how to tie my shoes. She was the only person in that house who was really there for me, and you took her away.
Regardless of how Lois was feeling, the funeral proceedings carried on, and she was actually a talking point. So much so that she was asked to speak about her beloved Meredith. Meredith's family recognized her as being Carter's daughter, and even she could not hold back her unhappiness for a short eulogy.
That's the daughter of the richest man the dead lady ever worked for.
Thank you for being my teacher. Even today, you're teaching me that the people you love most of all can still betray you.
Carter actually started feeling bad about what he did to Lois, which was certainly unexpected. There was no way to bring Meredith back or make up for what he'd done, but he was rich enough to buy her a pond. It's the gesture that counts, right?
I figured you can come here to sit whenever you miss Meredith.
Daddy, this is beautiful.
Lois was surprised to receive an actual heartfelt apology from Carter. Maybe going to the funeral did have its perks after all. However, Lois wasn't out of the woods yet, and she was about to learn that Carter actually kept a lot of secrets from her. What on earth was she going to do with 2 ponds?
I'm sorry, Lois. You were right. People you love can betray you. But if they're rich enough, they can buy apology ponds. Oh no, Raphael, the old gardener, died. I have a story I have to tell you, and spoiler alert, you'll be getting another pond.
In second place, things were off to a rough start for Lois. Not only was her vacation ruined by seeing Quagmire do the unthinkable, she also received a barrage of insults from Peter. But what's new, right? Unfortunately, their vacation to Quagmire's cabin wasn't just off to a rough start, it was about to get much worse.
Oh. Hey. This the week you guys were coming out?
Hey, Lois, look at me. I got postpartum depression. Wah! I'm sad about stuff. Wah!
Swimming in a toxic lake was not a great idea by any means, and unfortunately the Griffin family paid the price. Instead of coming home from a vacation at the lake with good memories and some sunburn, Lois and the family came home with almost none of their hair, and who knows how many nasty communicable diseases.
Oh my God, what the hell is wrong with this lake? So they can just dump their waste into the lake? This can't be legal.
What kind of world is this where you can't even trust the oil companies anymore?
Back home in Quahog, Lois needed to make a plan to hide their hideous appearance. What she came up with was not exactly great, and it made them look like a bunch of 16th century weirdos. Better than looking like a bald person, I guess.
Mom, how long do we have to wear these wigs?
Until our hair grows back, Chris.
Lois, being the upstanding citizen that she is, decided to take matters into her own hands. However, as is typical, she was met with a stark reality check of how things work in the real world of politics. How could you expect a housewife to know better, right?
Mayor West, I'm here as an outraged citizen. The Quahog oil refinery is emptying all their toxic waste into the lake.
Yeah, I told him it was fine.
What?
And in return, I get free oil from my hair.
Lois decided to not take this lying down, and instead she fought the system head on. A woman running for mayor in Quahog was somewhat unheard of, but Lois decided to try her luck anyway. As we could expect, the treatment she received in return was rather stereotypical, even insultingly so.
Mr. Mayor, I promise you this. Next election, I'm gonna run against you, and I'm gonna win.
Can a woman really be mayor, or will she just bleed all over the city?
Peter, of course, was 100% on board with Lois becoming mayor, but for all the wrong reasons. It's typical that he'd only see a way to gain and enrich his own life. Meanwhile, Lois was having somewhat of a hard time since she severely overestimated the average intelligence of Quahog voters.
You know, you bastards got a stake in this, too. I mean, Lois is my wife, and if she's the mayor, we can pretty much do whatever the hell we want.
I don't understand these people. He didn't even say anything, and they're eating it up.
Lois, being the adaptable person she is, decided to lean into the dumbness and see how far she could take it. As it turns out, the voters were buying everything she was selling by the pound. Who knew voters were so easy to trick and manipulate?
Lois, undecided voters are the biggest idiots on the planet. Try giving short, simple answers.
Mrs. Griffin, what are your plans for cleaning up our environment?
9/11.
Mrs. Griffin, what about our traffic problem?
9/11.
And we're getting the final results in now. Quahog's new mayor is Lois Griffin.
In the end, Lois achieved her goal and secured the position of mayor. This meant the big job had now begun, and time would tell whether she was actually capable. The town citizens were already becoming quite a handful to deal with, and she had to be on her toes to keep them happy.
And the first thing I'm gonna do as mayor is clean up Lake Quahog.
Well, I know the people will support you, Lois.
No new taxes! But what about the terrorists? That's right. Terrorists!
So far, Lois was ranting all the nonsense that came into her head, and by some ridiculous chance, it actually worked. So far, she was having good ratings from the townspeople. However, her new high position didn't change the fact that her children still saw her as their slave.
Mom, everyone on TV says you're running the town great. Maybe you could do some damn laundry once in a while.
Before long, Lois started enjoying the perks of being mayor, and who could blame her, right? Ryan was quick to point out that it wasn't exactly exemplary to use your position as mayor to get yourself fancy things like a new handbag. Turns out, Lois couldn't resist her female urges long after all. Peter also got involved, which was catastrophic for the whole town.
I may have dipped into the tax surplus.
Wait a minute, you used taxpayer money to buy yourself a handbag? What the hell's up with these rolling blackouts?
Well, since Lois is the mayor, I'm allowed to reroute all the town's electricity.
This was, unfortunately, only the first incident of a snowball effect, and Lois quickly became enamored with things she couldn't afford. When you are in a position like she is, however, these things usually become available to you, not only from well-meaning sources. The oil company she stopped from polluting the lake was back, and they knew exactly how to bribe Lois.
Excuse me, how much is this coat?
It's $4,300.
I'd like to buy you that coat.
Really?
All I ask in return is that you let my company do just a little bit of dumping in your lake.
Lois sold out the entire natural lake and surrounding area for something as stupid as a coat. However, the soft, new coat didn't feel so good when it was made public that she was the sole reason the now stunning lake was being filled with toxic waste again.
I want the coat.
Excellent. Then we have a deal. We would like to thank Mayor Lois Griffin for our newest waste pipe.
When Lois tried to put a stop to the pipeline, she was quickly caught in a trap of her own making. Suddenly, the money she spent on herself could be used against her. This proves that women don't make good mayors after all. Lois realized that being mayor wasn't something she could do, and she gave the position back to Adam West. What a royal waste of time.
Oh, I'm a crook, am I? What about all the money you embezzled? You want people to find out about that?
You know what, West? You can have your job back. Politics does terrible things to good people.
Good for you, Lois.
Our first spot takes us to a classic Griffin family adventure that went very wrong. Peter was obsessed with getting Chris badges in the Boy Scouts, and this resulted in a road trip all the way to New York City. Of course, with Peter behind the wheel, it wasn't long before things started going wrong.
Peter, we're lost. Would you please find some place to ask for directions?
By the time Lois finally convinced Peter to pull over and ask for directions, they had reached an Indian casino in the middle of nowhere. Lois was adamantly against gambling, but even the most strong-willed person would be worn down after such an exhausting road trip.
Can you tell me how to get to New York?
Well, sure, but what's your hurry, man? Don't you want to play a little first?
Thank you, but I really don't approve of, gambling.
The casino owners convinced Lois that the entire village shared the profits of the casino as a way to soften her stance. Eventually, they broke through and got Lois to try her hand at gambling. Unfortunately, moderation was not exactly in her vocabulary.
Well, as long as you're not using it for firewater.
Hey, I didn't know you know how to play poker, Lois.
Yeah.
Well, how you doing?
Yeah.
That's good, honey. Let's go.
Yeah.
Peter quickly noticed the spiral Lois went into, and even she couldn't deny how good gambling made her feel. The lights and dopamine hits are designed to keep you intrigued, and Lois was like a moth to the flame.
Yeah, gambling is great, no question about it.
I'm so embarrassed.
Peter was quite an understanding husband for a change, but this was before he learned how deep Lois had fallen into the rabbit hole. She had kind of lost their only form of transport, and of course, the casino had a strict no-take-backs policy.
But here's the really silly thing, Peter. I sort of bet our car.
Yeah?
So we're not allowed to return gambling losses.
In an attempt to fool their way back into having a car, the Griffins decided that it would be best for Peter to act like a native Indian. By this logic, he would be entitled to a share of the profits. The only thing they didn't expect is that the casino owners might put him to the test.
Oh, I come from a long line of you people. Maybe we can put him through some sort of test, like a really impossible stunt to prove he's the real deal.
The only way to prove his native Indian heritage was for Peter to go into the wilderness to have a spiritual vision. Lois tried desperately to argue, but she had gotten them into the mess and had done enough.
Peter, please don't do this. We can buy another car. I'll give extra piano lessons on Sundays.
Come on, Lois. All I gotta do is have a spiritual vision.
With all being said and done, the casino owners chased Peter and Chris off into the woods. Ultimately, the casino owners admitted something awful to Lois, that they were just trying their best to not give the car back. Now, thanks to her, Peter and Chris were left to their own devices.
Why would you send my husband and son out into the wilderness without any food or supplies?
'Cause, we really like your car.
After a very tense wait, the pair finally emerged from the woods with a spiritual vision in tow. All's well that ends well, and the family eventually got their car back. What they also got was a serious reality check on Lois and her dangerous gambling potential.
Peter, Chris, oh, thank God. Are you okay?
Take your crappy car back.
Do you think Lois deserved to have all this happen to her? While you decide, check out our other Family Guy countdowns.